Hello and welcome to the Migraine Diaries, usually a week-by-week account of the making of my game Scotoma and the reason why I always have a curious feeling that someone's watching me. I've reached episode 10, so I'm celebrating with a beer. Oh Jesus, that's awful. This episode, I'm going to go over my history with horror games because it's pretty long. I'll also likely split this into two parts. To give you an idea of just how old I am, my first computer was a Commodore 64 back in the 1980s. That's me, ancient and unfathomable, like a pixel art Cthulhu. Anyhow, Beyond the Forbidden Forest was my first experience with proper horror gaming. Originally released in 1985, it landed in my lap in 1991 as part of a magazine cover tape. You roam a dark forest full of hideous creatures such as giant wasps, tremors-like worms and murderous scorpions armed only with a bow and arrow. And as primitive as it looks now, it had atmosphere in spades, as you were never sure when an enemy would appear. For the time, the deaths were pretty nasty and accompanied by some alarming music. You never wanted to find yourself falling into the hands of one of these creatures. I'll be honest, it scared the shit out of me at the time. On a side note, while it wasn't exactly a horror game, Creatures, a cutesy platformer with a vicious side, probably was an early introduction to gore for me. Look at this poor bastard. Finally, a quick shout out to Turrican for its blatant Giga-inspired World 4 treatment. It was around the same time that I encountered a game in my local arcade called Splatter House, a side-scrolling beat-em-up that liberally rips off aspects of the Friday the 13th, Poltergeist, Nightmare on Elm Street films and innumerable others. It was catnip to a young kid with a burgeoning interest in spooky things, and I even tried designing some Splatterhouse-esque horrors myself. It was visceral and controversial at the time, and I loved it. The Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis, was the next gaming system I owned, and it had some real classics. Alien 3, the continuation of the Splatterhouse series with the third installment, Zombies Ate My Neighbours, and so on and so on. The one I really latched onto, though, was Gynaug, or Gynaug, never been sure how to pronounce it. A horizontal shoot-em-up that was, gameplay-wise, fairly unremarkable, but the visual design, holy shit. It was a dizzying mix of throbbing arteries, rotting flesh, pistons, contorted faces, and some gross phallic symbolism with the final boss. It was a genuinely macabre game, and once again, I loved it. Bizarrely enough, one of the developers went on to make Choaniki, an outlandish homoerotic shoot-em-up. Go figure. Also, shout out to Alien Storm for some inventively gross creatures, not least the model work used for official advertising and on the cover of the game. Moving on to the PS1, which I never owned but had some fortunate friends who let me play their systems. What else but Resident Evil 1 and 2? Well, I mean, there's the original Silent Hill, but I wasn't quite there yet. Seriously though, Resi 1 introduced me to a world where games could have real music and polygonal worlds just convincing enough to simulate reality, and it just dripped with atmosphere once again. See the police station lobby in Resi 2 for proof. It embraced all the tropes of B-movie filmmaking, including the poor acting, but more importantly, it was genuinely frightening. The first zombie encounter in Resi 1, the barely glimpsed liquor running past the window in 2, and that constant feeling that you never had enough bullets to hand. True classics. The shout out for this platform goes to Parasite Eve. It's a mighty fine body horror going on in that game. Okay, I'm going to cut it there, but part 2 will be next week. Hope you join me for it. If you don't, get yourself some awful beer and drink that instead. Cheers.